morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our NUIT Tech Talk today, the first of the new year and new quarter on securing your devices for the new year. I'm Christina Bello with the NUIT Communications team and have with me today's presenter, Mary Karp from our security team. Before we begin the presentation today, if you're having any trouble hearing me or Mary, please make sure that your volume is adjusted accordingly, either on your speakers or headphones, that the volume's turned all the way up. Also, make sure that you're using a wired connection if that's available, and that you've closed any applications running in the background that are connected to the internet, email, any other web browsers you might have open. It'll just give you the best connection during the presentation today. If you have a question at any time, you can type it into the Q&A box down here, and we'll answer those questions as soon as possible throughout the presentation. After the presentation, we'll also give you an opportunity to download the PowerPoint that Mary's going to be going through in just a minute. And we're also recording this, so you can watch this at a later date, and you'll all be sent a link to that as well. But before we get started, we have a couple quick poll questions we want to ask you about your familiarity with computer and device security. So our first question is, do you use antivirus software on your personal computer? I'll give you all a moment to answer that question. Yes, no, or if you're not sure. Not asking about work computers specifically. We're actually going to get into both of these topics during the presentation. So we're just curious how many people run antivirus on their home or personal computers. Okay, good. It looks like most of you do. A couple know and a couple aren't sure, so we'll address that during the presentation. So I'll give you all one more moment to answer that question. Okay, great. All right, and we'll move on to the second question here, which is, do you have a lock, a PIN, a password, pattern lock on your smartphone if you use a smartphone? So again, we'll give you all a moment to answer that question. Okay. Again, good. It looks like many of you do, a couple of you don't, and we'll go into why that's important also in the presentation today. But we just want to get a sense of how many people are doing this. All right. One more moment to answer that question, and we'll move on to the last poll question here. Okay, and our last question is, are you familiar with the Internet of Things? This should be an interesting question. Good, it looks like a couple people are. This is another thing that we're going to be talking about during the presentation today. Okay, good. So hopefully several of you will learn something new. All right, great. And we'll give you all one more moment to answer that question as well. Great. All right, and with that, I will hand it over to Mary.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. I want to apologize ahead of time. I came down with a virus and I'm still recovering, so if I have a cough fit or sound like Christy Alley, that's what that's about. Since we're having this tech talk sort of after the holidays, I thought I'd give you some tips on how to secure some of those new devices you and your friends and family have acquired over the past month or two. So feel free to interrupt me at any time if you have any questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. So let's dive right in and start with a pretty obvious one, your computer. I'm sure this is a familiar bullet one for everyone, but you certainly want antivirus software on the machine. You can get viruses 100 different ways: downloading an attachment in an email, plugging in an infected flash drive, downloading something from a website. Sometimes just visiting a website is enough because your browser is set to load certain types of content automatically, and bad actors can take advantage of this to slip in some nefarious code. And this does go for non-Windows machines as well as for Windows. We see regular cases of malware on every operating system here at the university, so Macs and Linux boxes are not immune, and neither are Android and iOS devices. As far as the antivirus software itself, you may have noticed that Northwestern provides Symantec on university-owned machines when they're given to you, but it's in the university's best interest to make sure that your personal machines are clean as well, so the antivirus installer is actually available for your home machines too. And we definitely encourage you to take advantage of that. If you're not a big fan of Symantec, there are a plethora of other options out there. Windows comes standard now with what they call Defender. There's Avast and ABG, Malwarebytes. There are a lot of options out there. I do want to caution people, though, if they're going to go that route, that some of these free options, the free versions of antivirus software, come packaged with their own little bag of spam and adware if you're not careful. So you do want to be careful when you're searching those out. And if you're not very confident, you should always ask your friendly neighborhood IT person to help you find the right one.
Mary, we had a great question. Somebody just asked about downloading Symantec for their home computers. So they can do that with their university login credentials. Do they need to uninstall and reinstall that once a year for it to work, or should it just continue to work?
No, it should continue to work. And you should set it to automatically update.
Okay, great.
Yeah, support Symantec. I believe that we do have a version that works on Windows 10 now.
So, and just so everybody knows, so somebody just asked for antivirus for Windows 10. And Mary, can you repeat that answer real quick?
Yeah, I believe that the version that's up now works on Windows 10.
Okay, and for Macs as well, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Another good way to keep your computer secure is to set the operating system and applications to run updates automatically. I know everybody thinks they already do run updates, but I mean it actually running them, because I've been there. Instead of allowing the OS to install the updates and restart, we think about how long it's going to take, and then wait, 2 months before we finally feel like we can give up the computer or close those documents that we're working on. But this is fairly self-defeating, because that's exactly how the computer ends up with 120 updates to install over the course of an hour and a half. So sometimes it's worth it to just do that quick reboot, make sure that you're all updated. And it's the same thing with programs. It's worth clicking through those Adobe and Java updates that keep popping up in the corner of your screen, instead of waiting until you're 3 versions behind and your browser's no longer allowing you to run content on most websites. An update is essentially a software vendor saying, listen, there's this problem, but don't worry, here's the fix. So the longer you wait to update, the longer the bad guys have to say, hey, now we know about this problem. How can we use that on machines that haven't been fixed to do whatever it is that we want to do? And unpatched systems are one of the primary ways that vulnerabilities are exploited. So it's really worth taking the extra time to make sure the updates are run.
And somebody asked a good question. If they've set their computer to install automatic updates and do scans, but they find something's not working or they don't think it's scanning, you can call the IT support center, and we can help walk through, kind of troubleshoot and make sure everything's working the way it's supposed to, because we really do want to make sure your computers are getting scanned for viruses and that updates are being installed. And then we had another question. Someone asked if they're using McAfee, if there's any other forms of protection they should be using, or if that should pretty well do it for antivirus, spyware, all of those things.
I think most of these antivirus programs now address things like spyware.
Okay.
You probably have to read into it a little bit more. I know a lot of people have used Spybot and other applications, but occasionally having various applications running at once can cause some collisions. So you want to be careful with it.
Okay, great.
Okay. Back up your files. There are many, many options for it. You can use external hard drives, which are pretty cheap now, $100 for a terabyte, which is more space than the average person knows what to do with. Many of these drives come with a little program that will help you set up automatic updates, automatic backups, so that you don't even have to really think about it. It'll just, do it monthly or weekly or whatever you set it to. You also have cloud options that you can pay for as a subscription, and backups are done automatically. CrashPlan is an example of this that many of you may have on your university-owned machines. And if you don't, I definitely encourage you to ask your local IT support about it, or call the IT support center at OneHelp to find out what your options are. CrashPlan can be purchased directly from the vendor for personal use, which would be an entirely separate account from your Northwestern affiliated backups. You can also use cloud options like Google Drive, Dropbox, iCloud, those kinds of services to perform manual backups for your personal data, where you're selecting the files or folders you want to back up and just, dragging and dropping them into the box. I do want to mention that university data should stay on university systems. So if it's work related, please take advantage of CrashPlan or use one of the other file sharing cloud storage options affiliated with the university, like Box or SharePoint. Your personal cloud accounts should be used for personal data. And one more thing that I would caution when you're using cloud storage is that you make sure that you're not storing your passwords or credit card numbers or anything like that in a file that you're then uploading into the cloud. That's not a good idea for obvious reasons. And to be honest, you shouldn't be storing those things in documents at all, no matter what you've named them. If they're a machine in plain text format like that, they're at risk. So I guess here's a little bonus computer security tip, which is look into a program like KeyPass or LastPass or PasswordSafe, which are encrypted databases that you can use to store sensitive data like this. You just have to remember the one password to get into the database, and then you can just document your secrets to your heart's content and not have to worry about some stray piece of malware scanning a Word document and finding everything. So, sorry, Christina, did you say something?
Yep, that sounds great.
Okay. Getting back on track here, stay away from illegal torrents. I don't just say this because it's the legally and morally appropriate thing to do, although it is. I also say it because this is a really common way to compromise your machine. You can accidentally download malware from other people. You can accidentally upload it to other people. You can accidentally upload more of your files than you intended, and so on and so forth. Many of these programs actually behave a little bit like malware themselves. You think you've restricted access or shut them off entirely, and there they are, hiding in the background, running without your permission. And this makes sense. Their main goal is to get as much content from as many users as possible, because that's how the community stays active.
Mary, a question about related to malware, actually. Somebody asked, they installed malware bytes on their computer to protect against malware. But can they also use that with Symantec or Avast, or does that again kind of get into the issue where they all kind of are trying to do the same thing?
Yeah, that's another issue where you might end up with some collisions or one of the antivirus programs not liking one of the other ones. I've seen people, when they know that they have a virus, download something specifically to scan something else because whatever was naturally on there didn't catch it. And so they'll download malware bytes and run a scan and clean it up and all of that. And that is probably fine, but then you want to go ahead and remove one of those pieces.
Okay.
One of those programs. Okay. So another word on torrenting. We see it on campus every day, and contrary to popular belief, it's not just students that are doing this. I have a personal mantra that summarizes my approach as an IT security professional and really as a human being. And that's that if you want people to behave in a certain way, you have to make the right or secure or best thing to do the easiest and the most convenient thing to do. Because you can have all the hammers in the world and people will find a way to subvert you. But if you give them what they want in a better way, that's when you're the most successful. And that's exactly what's happening now when it comes to entertainment and a lot of these other popularly torrented activities. It's become so easy and affordable to get music and movies and TV shows, games, even software over the internet through subscription services. There's Netflix and iTunes and Spotify. There are Steam sales with games for less than $5. Northwestern's got a home use program that I linked to here at the bottom of this slide with an agreement with Adobe and Microsoft for their creative and office suites. So for something like $20 a year, you can have what used to be well over $1,000 in software. It's really not worth all the risks associated with torrenting, and you'll be receiving software patches from the vendor when you have a legitimate copy. So,
and I'll mention just really quickly that obviously Mary just mentioned there's a link here to the IT website for information about that program. There's also links earlier in the PowerPoint to the antivirus software, and everyone can download, excuse me, I'm catching Mary's cold. You can download the PowerPoint at the end of this presentation. We'll have all the links in it, so you can go to the websites that we're talking about.
So a lesser known thing that you can do to help protect your computer is to operate out of an account that only has user level permissions. Administrators on a computer can access anything. They can read and edit and delete any files on the computer, even in other users' profiles. They can change security and other settings on the computer. They can install and remove any software they want. Users have a subset of those permissions. Usually they can read and edit and delete their own files, but not anybody else's. And they can only change settings that pertain to the appearance or basic input functions for the machine, but not any of the major security or update functions. And they're usually pretty restricted in terms of what they can install or remove. So generally when you're first setting up a new computer, and it walks you through all those prompts to set up an account, your account will be an administrator by default. This is because most operating systems assume that you'd like to be able to perform basic tasks like installing new software, and they're right. But here's the thing. Once you're done installing the software, your use of administrator level privileges is often pretty static. You're surfing the web, you're playing games, you're doing these other routine tasks. By creating and using a user level account, you're forcing any programs or scripts that want to install themselves on your device to ask your permission first. Yeah, that means that you're going to have to enter the administrator password sometimes to do things that you'd like to do, and that's annoying. But it also means that when you accidentally click on that bad link, malicious code will have a lot more trouble running on your machine without your knowledge. Now, setting this user account up is fairly simple to do using the settings in your OS, but it's an unfamiliar task for a lot of people. So this is another area where you might want to talk to an IT tech that you know to set things up and show you how you can use that administrator password without having to be logged into the account. And for any IT staff who might be listening today, think about trying to reduce the number of business users who are operating with administrator credentials. There's a balance to be struck between allowing people to do what they want and need to do without having to wait for assistance, and allowing people to dig themselves into a hole that's equally, if not more, inconvenient for them.
It's a great suggestion.
Okay, moving on to network security. Some people might have received some upgraded network equipment for this holiday season, maybe some wireless repeaters to boost your Wi-Fi signal to your basement or out onto your porch. One of the things that you definitely want to do while configuring Wi-Fi is create a strong wireless password and use WPA2 encryption if possible. It usually prompts you as you're going through. Most routers prompt you through the process, but they don't often have a very robust strength check on the password. So we on the security team like to encourage people to use phrases with some sort of weird punctuation or numbers when you're creating secure passwords, because the length helps here, and it's a lot easier to remember than a series of alphanumeric characters. And just a note on making your wireless network name, also known as your SSID, invisible instead of using a password. I've seen a lot of people do this and think they're being really sneaky because the network doesn't show up in a list of available networks when people are looking to connect. But it's really easy to see that signal you're broadcasting for people to know what they're doing. And you don't need, creepy Fedora man next door doing Lord knows what on your network, because he's got one of the many, many free tools out there that can sniff out those wireless signals.
Mary, we had a great question about the passwords. So a lot of these come with long kind of factory set passwords. Are those okay to keep, or should people change those, even though they're long and usually pretty complicated?
Those are generally okay to keep in the sense that they are unique to that router, but the problem is that most people can't remember it, and so for good reason. It's just a random series of numbers and letters, and so they often write it down and stick it on the fridge or something like that, which, hopefully somebody that you don't want on your wireless network isn't actually in your house necessarily, but even so, having a password written down somewhere that's easily accessible isn't ideal. So I would say go ahead and change it to something that you have an easier time remembering.
Great.
Okay. One trick that you can try with your wireless network is setting up a guest network or broadcasting to different networks if your router has this capability, which a lot of them do. This way you can have one network and password for yourself and other inhabitants of your home, and one network with a separate password for guests. Many people are sharing folders and other resources on their home networks, and sometimes it's just best to make sure that a small and predictable number of people have access to them. You don't always know what kind of stuff's on a guest device, and this is another one of those ways to just build a little extra defense in.
Great.
So this
actually, just real quick, Mary, sorry. Going back to the password question, do you recommend diceware or passphrases as good password policy?
Yeah, passphrases are good because that increases the length of the password, which makes it significantly more difficult to crack.
Great.
So this setting up a guest network is another tip that has some technical overhead. So again, consult your favorite tech nerd on this one if you're interested in doing it and aren't sure how. And there's also a link at the bottom of this page with some guidance. By the way,
I'll mention. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to mention that Northwestern has a guest network. You might have noticed this, and it's a very similar concept. People who are here but don't have university credentials can have network access, but in our case, they have to register their devices and they have limited access to some of our campus resources. And if you do have a guest on campus, let them register their devices this way. It's very easy. It'll get them access that they're looking for. Don't enter your own NetID and password on their machine to give them access. It usually is going to save it, and this means that everything they do on the network is traceable to your NetID and not to them. So if there's trouble, you don't want to be telling the security team that they should take your word for it, that it wasn't you. So just let them register those devices.
Great. We had another question, and you actually addressed it a little bit, talking about the university guest network. When you set up a guest access, do they have a different level of authority on the network?
Sometimes you can set that. It depends on the router that you have. So you have to Google the make and model and just see what you can find. Okay, number 3, and this one is very important, lockdown router management access. Routers come with a handy web interface that you can visit through your browser to configure settings after you've set the router up. That's how you'd set up a guest network, for instance. If your router didn't come with instructions on how to log into the interface, like I said, it's fairly easy to Google for the make and model of the router, and it'll give you a walkthrough. For reasons that remain entirely unclear to me, router manufacturers continue to produce software that helps you through the wireless network setup. That's the Wi-Fi network that you're actually broadcasting, but never prompts you to change the default administrator credentials for the router itself. So what this means is that if I can manage to get on your network, I can visit the address of your router, which is highly predictable. It's one of maybe 5 IP addresses, and use default credentials like admin or admin password to directly access the router, and sometimes even view your password for your wireless network in plain text, or change it momentarily for my own needs. Just changing the default password stops intruders from taking advantage of this feature, so it's definitely worth doing. And on the topic of router configuration, it's wise to disable unnecessary features on your router. Wi-Fi protected setup, WPS, WLAN, universal plug and play. If you don't need them, don't have them available for use. Every service has potential vulnerabilities. It's nice to not even have to worry about some of them because they're disabled. Okay, on to mobile security.
Mary, can you talk really quickly about password manager programs?
Sure. Those are the databases that I was talking about before. There are some of them that you can install on your machine, and it'll just be on your machine, and there are some of them that save your passwords online in an encrypted format. So I think LastPass is one of those online ones. KeyPass is one of the ones that you can install on your machine. There's Password Safe. And essentially, you just create one password so that you can get into that database. And then inside the database, you can have as many groupings and entries of passwords as you'd like. You can usually put notes. You can attach files. So I know people who keep, credit card numbers saved in these things, and any private documents that they might have.
So as long as they're pretty much reputable companies, these are okay to use to store passwords.
Yes, and if you're not sure if it's a reputable company, I would say go ahead and contact the IT support center. They can help let you know if this is one of the things that we've heard about. They can always forward you along to the security team as well.
Great.
Okay. So mobile devices. This is a popular one to have right after the holidays, a tablet or a phone. These small handheld devices have operating systems that are built on the more familiar computer operating systems, but they're vulnerable to different types of malicious activity just because the operating system is a little bit different. And this is a relatively new area in security because until recently, phones didn't do much other than make phone calls and send text messages. With the number of types of things that we use them for now, though, banking and shopping and work, it's really important to secure these devices. And the first way to do that is to secure it setting a PIN or password or some other locking mechanism. This is another one of those security measures that's annoying. You have to unlock the phone every time the screen goes black, but they can make all the difference. The amount of personal information on the average smart device is really incredible. You're probably auto-logging into Facebook and Amazon, your app store, other apps, your emails accessible, your browser history, your contacts. Basically, any of your security questions for any given website are probably answerable just by skimming through your phone. And all it takes to prevent unauthorized access to all that information are a couple of digits. Bad actors who find or steal the phone are far more likely to just wipe it and resell it than expend all the resources necessary to break into it. But if you leave it completely open, why shouldn't they capitalize on the opportunity to pull other kinds of data out? And if entering a few digits every time the screen goes blank is too much, consider using biometrics like a fingerprint or facial recognition. These technologies are becoming a lot more accurate. It's much easier to hold your finger on the sensor than having to enter keystrokes or numbers. You barely even have to look at the phone to do it. And if you're concerned about the security of using fingerprints when your fingers are leaving prints all over the rest of the device, use a finger you wouldn't normally touch your phone with, maybe your ring finger on the opposite hand. Anybody who has tried to add their Northwestern email account to their mobile device has probably noticed that we do require a PIN or password to be set in order to do this. That's because your Northwestern email might contain data that's intended for internal use, and the university has a vested interest in protecting that from the public eye. But fingerprints will often work in place of a PIN if you prefer them for the convenience factor. Patterns, I believe, will not work for this because they're not secure enough, but they are better than nothing. So if you don't care about Northwestern email on your device, consider using a pattern rather than having no lock at all.
I'll mention two things that I've learned. First of all, pins are great as long as it's not something like 1234 or 1111. Those aren't exactly the most secure options, and I know a couple people who have those as their pin, and it's not great security. I'll also mention, I learned this from one of our other security staff, you can set it to more than 4 numbers. I know usually it has like 4 little boxes that you can enter, but you can set like 6 digits, 8 digits. I don't know if there's a N limit, but you can set it to more than 4 if you want to set a PIN.
Thanks, Christina. That's a good point. Another good idea is to activate the remote wipe function. Most phones and tablets come with some kind of app that helps you do this. Samsung, Apple. It could be good for your peace of mind if and when the device is stolen. You may never get the device back, but at least you can know for sure that whoever picked it up didn't also pick up a boatload of details about your personal life. There's also been a lot of discussion among carriers and manufacturers during the past year or so about allowing people to permanently, what we call brick a device, that is to turn it into a very expensive paperweight. The carrier knows that the particular device with its serial and other identifying numbers is tied to you. So if you call in and let them know that a device has been stolen, some of them might be able to permanently remove all functionality over the air so that it can't even be reformatted and resold. If your carrier or manufacturer allows this, it might provide you with some extra certainty that the device has been wiped, and it might additionally feel like good punishment for whoever took the 5-finger discount on your device in the first place. Here's another familiar one, updating your apps. Your operating system is usually controlled by your carrier, so you're sort of stuck with the updates that they're willing to give you. But your apps are updated on a pretty frequent basis, and that's the method through which most mobile device compromises happen. We saw quite a few devices this past year that had been compromised by nefarious code that was written into some legitimate apps in the Apple App Store. The apps were caught and removed fairly quickly. They put up updated versions within a few weeks that didn't contain the malware, but people who had the app already on their device were still experiencing some of the ill effects because they never pulled the updated version down from the store. So you definitely want to update your apps. And along with updating them, be careful about which ones you're using in general. Try to stick with apps that are provided through a legitimate store, Google Play, Apple's App Store, Amazon's App Store, etc. Joe Coder on the internet might have made a really neat app with a walkthrough for how to install it directly on your phone without using the App Store, but this isn't a good idea. There are not as many checks on that app, and you can't easily find out about issues that other users have had with it. And even for legitimate apps that you do get out of the App Store, sometimes it's worth paying $2 for certain types of functionality instead of finding that elusive free app that has all the pop-ups. It was written by, Hacksaw 3000. My personal rule of thumb is if I can probably find enough quarters in my couch cushions to cover the cost, the extra peace of mind is worth it. Even if the app itself is legitimate, those ads are sometimes very tricky, popping up suddenly in the middle of something that you're about to click, so you get sent to who knows what web page. One of my colleagues' favorite things to say on the subject, and I think it's a really good thing to think about, is why is the service free? How is someone able to provide this functionality without charging us for it? We know it isn't out of the goodness of their heart. So what are they getting out of it? You know, are they selling the data? Are they getting us to click on something? Do they just trust us to donate? And pay attention to the permissions that the app is requesting. So, you know, why does Temple Run need to access your text messages, camera, and contacts? Do you like Temple Run enough that you don't care what they need to access? And then finally, don't root the device. I know a lot of tech-savvy people who've done this, and every one of them has run into problems. This is like the administrator versus user situation on computers. Rooting the device makes you an admin, but the average person has even less understanding of the Android or iOS operating system and how to use administrator permissions appropriately than they do with a computer operating system. This can cause all kinds of problems, security and otherwise. As it happens, rooting can cause hardware failures and often voids the warranty on the device, so you can't even back out of it if you completely hose the system.
Mary, we had another question. Someone asked if they purchase a new device and get their information transferred from their old smartphone to their new one, can malware or other issues be transferred to the new device? And if so, how can people prevent basically transferring problems from one phone to another?
It's possible. I have not seen a lot of stores that will transfer your apps necessarily, but sometimes I believe if you use Google or iCloud to back up apps, I think it might push them back down again. And I'm not sure if it pushes the most updated version. So I would say the best way to do it is to transfer your contacts and your photos and the kind of stuff that's, you know, personal, but then re-download the apps that you want directly from the App Store.
Great. And someone else had a question, and maybe this might be something more for their individual support context, but what about security features? For instance, I guess NMH has a new paging app that uses text messaging. How can people check on the security of that to make sure that information stays safe?
I would say that the number one thing, if you're getting that sort of private message on the device, is to set that PIN. But as far as the protocols that are used in order to send the message, I'm not sure, honestly.
Okay. So it sounds like something, they have local IT support, a good question to talk with them about.
I think so, because if it's a special app versus a text message, then probably the necessary encryption has been written into the app itself.
Great. And someone asked also, how can you tell if there's antivirus or malware installed on their phone and check if it's running? Is there antivirus that you can run on a smartphone?
There is. It's not clear. We've done a fair amount of research on this in the security office, and it's not totally clear to us how effective these apps are. But for instance, I have something called Lookout Secure on mine, and at the very least, it tells me what permissions an app is trying to have on my device. So I like it. It has its own remote wipe feature, and it says that it scans for malware, but I've never had it pop up and say, hey, this contains malware, please don't download this. So it's kind of if you want the extra peace of mind, go for it. Just like with everything else, be careful about the app that you're downloading, do some research on it, check the ratings within the App Store and see what people have to say. All set?
Yep, great.
Okay. So the final mobile security tip is don't take the device out of the country if you can help it. Once you're connecting to Wi-Fi in hostels and airports, the security of your device and the data on it is up in the air, pun absolutely intended. There are tablets and phones under $100 that you can purchase and keep for traveling purposes. So you have a blank device that can be used abroad for basic, web surfing, and then wiped at random without upsetting your life. That's the best part about it. You can wipe it before you leave. You can wipe it after you get back. And if the device gets lost or stolen while you're traveling, it's not a huge loss. It's less than $100. For work-related travel, check with your department about mobile device loaners that they might have. These are generally wiped and rebuilt pretty frequently, so they don't have many extra signed-in applications or things of that nature. And we have some recommendations for travel here at the bottom of this page. And then to the Internet of Things. Network-connected appliances are becoming more and more popular, from dryers to dishwashers to thermostats. And one can see why. It's incredibly convenient to have your phone playing music through your car speakers and your car sharing your GPS location with your house so that it can prepare for your arrival by, turning the heat up or putting your laundry on a quieter spin cycle. But the problem with the Internet of Things, perhaps more than any other technology that's come out lately, is that security isn't even on the radar for some of these products. And in this day and age, that's just unconscionable, and yet it's the case. This is the big new area because these devices make all sorts of new levels of convenience possible. It's the frontier, cutting-edge type arena, and so time to market is really important for these companies. And security is frequently viewed as a cost center and a time sink that doesn't have a huge return on investment, so it's just left out until something big and embarrassing happens. There are a couple of examples of IoT, which is what people are calling the Internet of Things, gone wrong from this year alone. The first one that comes to mind for a lot of people, since it's one of the scarier possibilities, are hacked vehicles. Cars have become increasingly dependent on electronics, much to the lament of many a gearhead, for a lot of their basic functions, even braking. And researchers a couple of months ago were able to control everything from the air conditioning to the radio to the transmission on a vehicle that was rolling down the highway 10 miles away from them. Researchers have hacked the OnStar communications on various cars. They've figured out how to unlock car doors, start engines, all of it. And what that means for people getting their cars stolen is obvious, I think. But people are also understandably concerned about what happens when someone just wants to wreak havoc, because we're easily talking about loss of life if these systems aren't secured. Smart TVs are another really popular device to have in the home. They do a lot of great things, but watch your settings and watch what you're agreeing to in exchange for the services. Voice control is great when you're cooking and can't fool with the remote control, but the terms and conditions on a lot of these devices let you know that your TV can and will listen to conversations occurring in its vicinity if it thinks that it's relevant to its voice control functions. And it may send these conversations in part or in whole to the manufacturer. And sometimes it's sending them unencrypted as well. It's, as long as it's perceiving that there's an audio command going on, which means it's basically legible to someone who knows how to listen and cares to. There have been fridges and laundry machines that were taken over and used in what's called a botnet to basically you install some malware on something and then use it to attack something else so that it doesn't all appear to be coming from the same place. It just sort of spams someone with network traffic. And there's even been a hacked tea kettle. The kettle could be controlled via smartphone app, so people didn't have to get up until the tea was ready, but it took almost no time for researchers to find a way to hijack the kettle's connection and reveal the wireless network password in plain text.
Someone had just commented with a great additional thing, cameras.
Yeah.
Are another thing.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, keeping your webcam sort of closed if you've got any way to do that, and your home security system and things like that. The home security systems tend to be a little bit better about their own security, but yeah.
And they shared a link, like baby monitors too. A lot of these are Wi-Fi connected now and have videos, video capabilities. So just again, another one to think about if it's connected to the internet.
Yeah,
who can
absolutely.
access it?
So, to save yourself from hackers interrogating your tea kettle, what can you do? There are a couple of technical considerations which are similar to the ones that we've seen before. Changing the default passwords, shutting off extra services that you don't need. This is a good security practice on anything, and it covers some of your bases for vulnerabilities that do require some degree of tech savviness. And of course, running updates. These things probably have updates like your other devices, but they might be more annoying to install. They might require you to opt in instead of having them occur automatically. They might even require you to download the update to a computer and then hook the computer into the device to install it. But you do want to do this, especially with devices that are so new. As I mentioned before, security features may sometimes be sacrificed just to get the product out the door, and then patches are created afterward to head off some problems, and you want those patches. Aside from technical tricks, though, there are some general questions you want to ask yourself about devices before purchasing or using them. One tip for securing the device is just to do a bit of Googling before you purchase or install one of them in your home. Has the product or the manufacturer been in the news recently with a breach or vulnerability? Do promotional items for the product make any mention of security features or even show a general awareness of the threats that might be posed by their product? A little goes a long way here, in my opinion. I feel much better about a company that's even aware that people might be concerned about the security of their devices versus a company that tacitly requires their consumers to assume a level of security that they've made no real promises about. Make sure that you or your trusted home IT person have at least a cursory understanding of how the device can be accessed. You control it from outside the house? Does it use a website? Does it use an app on your phone? Do you need a password to make changes? There's a lot here that doesn't require a tremendous amount of tech savvy, just some common sense. And then think about what kind of data you're allowing the device to access. Does it just know how you like your coffee in the morning? Or does it know your actual schedule, including when you are and are not home? Is it connected to a bank account, an e-commerce account like Amazon, an entertainment account like Netflix? The risk rating for these pieces of information is different, and you have to weigh the convenience of the service against the cost of compromise, each of them. Like was just mentioned, and one of my colleagues just mentioned this in his security podcast, was the baby monitors. Most parents would not feel comfortable with video of their baby's crib being accessible on the internet. It just feels wrong. So, think about these things. And then for some of the devices, you might want to consider the risk that whatever it is doesn't work or doesn't work as it was intended to. Maybe using some sort of network connected door lock is great because you travel and you can let your house sitter or dog walker into the house without having to bother with an extra key. But what if the door won't unlock one day for some nebulous technological reason? Or worse, what if it does unlock when you haven't told it to and some stranger is able to get into the house? If this device is on the fritz, can you tolerate it? Is the convenience worth it? So these are just some good questions to ask yourself. And finally, watch out for the latest and greatest on the scam email front. We've been seeing a lot of fake messages lately about missed Amazon shipments and UPS confirmations and that kind of thing. People are excited about getting packages, so it's easy to not check the email as closely as you might otherwise and end up giving up credentials or other information. Similar to that are these please see attached invoice, airline tickets, resumes, whatever, or your nephew is stuck in England, please send money. Some of these messages are pretty obvious, but others are quite good and actually create mock-ups of the website that you would expect to see when you click on the link, so just be careful with it. And just a heads up as we move into tax season here, that a lot of these are going to be focused around W-2s and refunds and supposedly angry notices from the IRS. Remember, anytime that you aren't sure if something's legitimate, don't click on the link. Look up the number yourself, navigate to what you know is the official website yourself, and then pursue things that way when you know that you're dealing with legitimate representatives of the company. We have all kinds of tips available on the Northwestern IT website, so I encourage you to take a look at these. There's a link here. Before we wrap up, I just want to call attention to the fact that a lot of what I've just said can be boiled down to a few common preventative measures in every security toolbox. Run updates and patches, disable extra services, change default passwords, conduct daily activities with the lowest level of user permissions necessary to accomplish a task. Don't use a device in a way that it wasn't intended to be used unless you're an expert and understand the technical details and the consequences of that use. Be aware of the type of data on the device and make choices accordingly. And be aware of the trade-offs between convenience and privacy. Know what you're giving up and why, and then you can determine whether it's worth it from a position of knowledge. So here are a few more security-related resources for interested parties. I especially like the podcasts. And again, there are links to resources related to specific content above on the individual slides, so feel free to go back and take a look at those. I've also left my phone number and an email address here in case anyone has questions for me at a later date. There's also the main security email address, which is maintained by myself, Tim LeCan, and Roger Safian. And for general IT questions, everyone's welcome, of course, to contact the IT Support Center at the number or email address here. So thanks to everyone for listening, and I guess we'll open the floor for questions.
Yeah, we actually have some great questions that came in. On the travel topic, someone asked, is it better if you're traveling at an airport, for example, Is it better to use your carrier's network or wireless in that situation?
Usually the carrier network is better just because you're not sure who else is on that airport network. I would say, if at all possible, just don't use Wi-Fi in airports.
Great. Someone else asked about Northwestern Box, the syncing service for data storage. Is the information on this system encrypted? Is that a secure option for file storage?
Yes, that is definitely a secure option for file storage. And I believe that we just made this unlimited. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Actually, that's going to be the Tech Talk topic in 2 weeks. We're going to be talking about what types of data really fits Box. So if you're interested in learning more about that service, that event will be coming up in 2 weeks from today. And let's see, someone else asked, is there a way to tell the number of devices connected to a router supplied by your internet provider?
Yes, that would be through the interface, the web interface for the router that we were talking about before, where you've got to look up the make and model and find out how to get into it.
Great. And someone else asked, is it best to turn your computer off every night or leave it on? So this person says they schedule updates to run every Sunday. Can they leave their computer on for the rest of the week and then just restart it on Sunday when new updates are installed, or should they turn it off every night?
As a personal rule, I usually turn it off just because it puts less strain on the hardware. Servers are built to be up 24 hours, but everything else is not necessarily. But with the rate at which we usually replace these devices anyway, I would say it's probably fine to leave it on, just as long as you are restarting it to make sure that updates are installed.
Okay. Let's see. And actually, just a note, there are a lot of great questions coming in, and I want to make sure we answer all of them. If you want to stay, we're going to continue answering these questions. If you need to leave, if you have lunch appointments, we are recording this event, so we do have the option to come back and watch it at a later date, but I do want to make sure we address all the questions that came in at the end here. So another question that came in was about university email. So they have their email forwarded to an AT&T and Google account that has their own passwords. Is that recommended for university security, or should they stick with using the university setup?
Yeah, that's not necessarily recommended. Using the university setup is better, just because we have more control over who has access to that data.
Great.
And having a separate password for your personal versus your professional email accounts is a good idea as well.
Great. Someone asked about reporting scam emails. When they're reported, are they blocked system-wide, or how is that addressed?
Sometimes, yeah, it kind of depends, because you can go kind of nuts just trying to play whack-a-mole with these things. But yes, especially when they present themselves as being from Northwestern, we try to catch those right away and block them at the border so that people aren't able to visit those websites and give up any credentials. And we definitely appreciate people sending it in. Even if you think somebody's already sent it, just go ahead and send it to security@northwestern.edu.
Great. Somebody asked, what kind of protection, either antivirus or anything else, should they have on an iPad, an Amazon Fire tablet? What do you suggest?
That's going to vary depending on the operating system. So the iOS versus the Android, I'm not sure what's available for each one. Like I said, on Android, I use Lookout Security, but I'm not familiar with the antivirus that's available for iOS devices. This is one of those things that you want to poke around on the Apple website and see what people are using.
Okay. And let's see what else we had come in here. What about portable devices that create your own personal mobile Wi-Fi hotspot? I know these are pretty popular, and some smartphones are starting to do this as well.
Mm-hmm.
Are those safe, or?
Yes, but you want to make sure that you're securing it with a password so that the people around you can't attach to your network that you're broadcasting.
Okay. And another question, any specific suggestions on devices for under $100 that people can use for travel? Do you have any particular recommendations?
I don't off the top of my head, but that is definitely something that I can look up and make recommendations on. Christina, is there a way to get in contact again after the...
Yeah, I have email addresses, and I can give you the information and follow up.
Okay, yes, I can follow up on that.
Okay, and let's see. Okay, someone asked about security for printers on campus. Is that something you can talk about really quickly?
Sure. What specifically?
They're reporting that there's an issue that they're unable to create a password for the printers. This one actually I think we might hold, and I'll follow up with you offline about this question. Just a note, if you're having trouble with printers in your area, talk to your local IT support. So Charlene, I'm actually going to follow up with you offline about this question. We did have another question about two-step security passwords for email accounts, two-step authentication. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great thing to bring up, actually. That's called multi-factor authentication. The idea behind that is that there are multiple ways to secure a device. It can be something that you know, like a password, something that you are, like a fingerprint, or something that you have, like a token or a device. And so the idea with multi-factor authentication for email accounts is that you are providing a password, and then you are getting some sort of like a call to your office phone or a buzz for an app on your mobile device that then asks you to confirm the login. So if somebody were to get a hold of your credentials and enter your password, you would still be getting a login request on another device that was in your possession. And that's a great way to make sure that your credentials are secure and that you can get into all of your accounts relating to the university. We have it with FASIS right now, particularly if you are getting your direct deposit information, you're required to set up multi-factor authentication just to stop people from being able to access your account.
Okay. And let's see. I think we got everything here. I think that is everything. I'm just a really quick. No, okay. We're gonna. I think we answered everything. If I missed you, send me an email, or Mary. Obviously, Mary's contact information is in there. Follow up with us. There were so many great questions that I'm 90% sure I got all of them. But again, if there's anything else we can do to answer questions for you, as Mary said, contact information is here, and I'll show everybody where you can download the PowerPoint that Mary went through. We just have 3 quick questions we want to ask for your feedback on today's presentation. So our first question is, did you learn something new during today's event? I'll give you all a moment to answer that question. Great. And someone just noted there are so many passwords they have to keep track of, and yes, we know it is absolutely a challenge, but it is in your best interest and will really keep you safe. All right, so we'll move on to the second question here, which is, do you plan to apply any of the information you learned at today's event? And again, we hope you do. If there's something you have a question about how to apply, either to your work computer or your personal device, give the support center a call. They're always happy to help. As Mary mentioned, the security team, it's in all of our best interest to keep everybody's information and devices secure here and at home. So again, if you have any questions, do let us know. Great. It looks like everybody has some good things they can take away from this event. All right. And the last question we have here is, on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate the overall quality of today's event? And again, if you have any feedback for us, do let me know. We always make adjustments and changes to these based on your input. So if there's anything else we can cover, there were so many great questions that we have more than enough for a whole new presentation. And we really appreciate all the questions that everybody asked. So again, great presentation, Mary. Thank you so much. There was so much great information in there. And I'll give you all one more moment to answer that question, and then I'll show you where you can download the PowerPoint. All right. And moving on to the last page here. Okay, so to download the PowerPoint, if you just click on this PDF file here and click Download File, it'll open up in a new web browser window for you, and you can download it from there. As I mentioned, we're also recording today's event, and we'll be posting that on the IT website later today, along with the PowerPoint, so you can watch it later or download it for your reference. And we'll be sending everybody a link to that probably tomorrow when it's up. And again, thank you so much, Mary, for your presentation. We're having our next Tech Talk in 2 weeks, as I mentioned, is on Box Unlimited, which is a file storage and sharing service. So if you're interested in that, an invite will be going out next. And thank you all for attending. And again, thanks, Mary, for the presentation.
Thank you.